Oh, Jody, I actually thought it was pretty impressive. I mean, 4-0, Dallas coming up, you go on the road to Arizona, a place they haven't played all that well, and you found another way to win.
Wednesday edition of Birds 365 with Rebecca guys, McMullen and McDonald. Wednesdays is Undefeated Wednesday, and it's usually Gill Day here on Birds 365, and that's the case again this week. He's out on the back porch. Mike Gill, our buddy from down the shore, ready to jump in with us. Let me ask the first question here, Johnny Mac. Mike Gill, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being, oh, yeah, I put my own money away for the Super Bowl because the Eagles aren't getting picked off in the NFC. Of course they're going to the big game come February, back to Arizona. 0 being win. No. The other team handed them the game on a silver platter. They didn't really win the game. They didn't earn the game. Between 0 and 10, you get the extreme ends of the opposite spectrum. Where would you rank the Eagles' win on Sunday against Arizona? How?
Oh, Jody, I actually thought it was pretty impressive. I mean, 4-0, Dallas coming up, you go on the road to Arizona, a place they haven't played all that well, and you found another way to win. I mean, to me, these are the good teams. I don't look at the aesthetics of a win. I look at time, place, when it fits into your schedule. I know they don't have Hopkins. They're not at full strength, but people care too much about the aesthetics and the score. You got out of there with a win, and you showed you can win in another way. I mean, they have been winning in a variety of ways. They've been blowing teams out. They've been sacking the quarterback. They've been putting up big points in the second quarter and then kind of riding away. They needed to get into a fist fight, and they showed if they got to get into a fist fight, they can put their dukes up and start swinging at you too. Aesthetically pleasing? No. Impressive over a 17-week schedule where 1 week you're just not going to have it? I think I'd give it about a 7.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I was looking at the spot, and I was really teetering whether to pick Arizona. Ultimately, I picked the Eagles because I thought they would out-talent the Cardinals, and ultimately they did. Although, if Matt Prater's there, it's probably going to overtime, and who knows what happens.
Yeah.
But, you take advantage of the spot. And the spot as a whole was a bad one for the Eagles. That's why I was thinking about Arizona, because as you mentioned, you have Dallas the next week. And obviously there's a human nature aspect, big NFC East game. The Cowboys are playing well, shockingly, with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I thought it was. And I think winning is a skill in this league. You have to learn to win. And I think what you say about they've been able to win different ways, and you mentioned Detroit, they had to, off-schedule offense, Jalen Hurts. Minnesota, passing game. The running game has been in there where they just go for 200 yards against Jacksonville. Now you see them win this game. They do a better job, whether it's just doing a better job in the personnel department and picking the better backup kicker.
Well,
hey,
listen,
so
John and Jody, how many teams are going to win a football game? We see teams that can't handle their starting offensive line. How many teams are going to win a football game when 3/5 of their line miss part of the game? I mean, generally when that happens, it's a disaster for these teams. The Eagles went without Kelsey, Dickerson, and Mailata for a sizable part of that game and still were able to just run that game out. Now, when the game, late in the game, when they ran the game, I think it was like a 17-play drive, it's kind of got lost in the sauce because the Phillies are
not for me. That thing, that was
but
almost,
who wins?
Yeah.
How many teams win a football game with their third left tackle, their second left guard, and their rookie center playing a lot of snaps?
Not Kelsey missed 3 snaps.
Kelsey was back in within a couple of plays, and when they had that very impressive take this 17-yard play, we're running it right down your throat, and there's nothing you can do about it. Dickinson was back in the game.
No. I said when push came to shove, they had their guys late in the game, and I think you saw them lean on those guys for that 17-play drive. You got those guys back, and they said, look, try to stop this, and they couldn't, and they got the 17-play drive and really ran that game out.
Correct. Yeah, it's still impressive because Opeta played far more than Dickerson. Driscoll's out there. Yeah, Kelsey's amazing. You think he's done for the year, and he's out for 3 snaps. That's the second time I've seen it. He did the same thing in Detroit a couple of years ago. Was it? I think it was Detroit. Missed a snap. You think he's out for the season. He's back in after halftime. But yeah, that offensive line is tremendous, and that's the second time they did the same thing in Detroit. Everybody was hand wringing. 4-minute offense. They run out the clock. Everybody in the building knew what was coming. Detroit couldn't stop it. Same thing here. They weren't able to pin. It wasn't quite as in some ways it was, because it was almost 8 minutes, 17 plays, 3 timeouts, even though they were helped by an injury. But they couldn't push it in. It's still that was so impressive to me, to be able to do that, to run the football with backup offensive linemen in this league, as you mentioned. It's just not done. And the Eagles can run the football against anyone. And I don't know who to give more credit to, so I'll ask you, Mike. Is that the offensive line, or is that Jalen Hurts? Because people are so freaked out by Jalen Hurts keeping the football, the backside especially, that they just open up space for the other runners.
Well, it could be a handshake. It could be a combination. Is that because of his ability to do that, it has teams on such high alert, and they're so good up front that they can pick and choose how they want to run the ball against you. I mean, they can RPO you to death and have Jalen Hurts be the guy. But I think what makes him, so dangerous is he knows when to pick his spots. He's not just recklessly running, because he does have the ability to throw the ball, and he trusts his offensive line. A lot of these teams, they don't trust their offensive line. They can't get it done up front. So the quarterback has to do, he'll try to do too much, and he runs too much. I don't think Jalen Hurts has any problem handing the ball off to Miles Sanders, because he knows that push is coming from those 5 guys up front, and we're getting that 2, 3, 4. And people, have been talking a lot about getting that bigger back in here. I think it's becoming evident that the Eagles are just saying, no, our bigger back is Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, he's the best. He is the best short yardage back in football.
Yeah.
The best.
So I think Hurts gets a lot of credit, but the offensive line is right there with him, because Hurts has the trust in him. So it's almost by proxy, I trust you. You are leading the path for all of us. So the offensive line, not sexy to talk about, but right now, I mean, the difference between them and some of these other teams is clearly they are way better up front than the reason why Minnesota's and those teams we can't take serious is they can't block. When push comes to shove, they can't block, and the Eagles can. That's the difference. Minnesota's 4-1. They're beating up on everybody. They look like they didn't belong on the same field.
They're not beating up on people. They're winning.
Well, I'm talking about if you're watching the records and saying, well, they're 4-1. Yeah. They are, but the problem is they're not looking as impressive because they can't block.
All right, since we all agree the 17-play drive to basically put the game away against the Cardinals this week was very impressive, that was the Eagles imposing their will on the opposition. Dallas comes to town this week. They've got one of the better defenses. They're coming off a week where they kind of did to Matthew Stafford what the Eagles did to Carson Wentz. No chance, no shot, you're going down. 5 sacks. They're second in the NFL in sacks at 20 as a unit. Is this a running week for the Eagles? Do they 100%. Once again say, we're going to run the ball down your throats? Micah Parsons, make a nice tackle on Miles Sanders 4 yards down the field. Okay, fine. We'll give you credit for it, but we keep moving the sticks. Is that going to be the Eagles' game plan? Heavy run against the Cowboys come Sunday night.
I think 100%, Jody. This team, Dallas, gets a lot of sacks. They get a lot of pressure. They do not stop the run very well. They're small. And this is the kind of game where you take advantage of Parsons. You run right at him. The Eagles' offensive line, I don't know what Mailata's status is, but, he's the kind of guy, you get him matched up, you run right at Parsons and make them stop you. And then, I think they're vulnerable. Diggs is a great player, but he gives up a lot of big plays. So a lot of play action, shots down the seam. This could be a Quez Watkins type of game where he just you lose track of him. He flies down the seam and gets a big catch. But, yeah, run the ball and then take your shots down the field as opposed to more of the underneath stuff that you've been seeing that gives Dallas a shot to get to the quarterback. So, yeah, Jody, I think the run game this week, it's going to be fun. Sunday night watching just a slosh of runs. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like. I'm not implying it's supposed to rain, but it might look like that rain game with 50 runs.
I'm with you. I would run it right at Micah Parsons. I'm surprised teams haven't tried to run it Hassan Reddick.
Nobody can run. They can't block.
I know. They can't block. You're right. It's Wednesday, guys. I feel like I do this every week.
Another one.
Another player of the week. Any guesses?
Got to be Cameron Dicker, the kicker.
It is Cameron Dicker, which is kind of weak. Come on. He made a 23-yard field goal to win it. I mean, come on. Jimmy Kemp.
Jody, you asked me last week about
no other special teams player came up big.
I know. That's why I don't know. I got to look at the whole league, but that's
Jody asked me last week about winning the game with Dicker, the kicker.
Yeah, he did win the game technically.
He did.
So he is the special teams player of the week.
All right, so let me ask both of you guys a question. Mike, if you this is probably more of a Johnny question than you, if you'll allow me this. If Jake Elliott's good to go, Dicker, the kicker, retain his practice squad spot? We know he won't be active because Jake will, but usually these guys, you're in, you're out. They're on the practice squad, basically like a pit stop on the highway, a rest stop, and then they're out the door thereafter. Will getting special teams player of the week honors merit him a practice squad spot for at least 1 week?
Mike, I think it does. I think here's the thing with Dicker. He can also punt. So you have the basic, you have the two backups in one. Now, I think ultimately it will be, do they need to spot down the road? Maybe they have an injury at a certain position where they might need to spot. But I do think it saves him for a couple weeks that they'll keep him around.
I think you got to reward the guy.
As a backup, not only as a backup kicker, but also as a backup punter, even though Aaron Siposs might have had his best game ever against Arizona, that consistency's not there yet. So
how many teams have a kicker on their practice squad?
No, usually because of injury, somebody's dealing with somebody. And then you're right. They usually, or if they have a bad kicker and they don't trust them.
I feel like so many kickers have been hurt this year, and nobody.
They have. Well,
and nobody picked this kid. I mean, I know he was in a camp and then he got to Baltimore, but you said he was there as a punter, not a kicker. So many teams have had kicking issues, and nobody had him on the Rolodex.
Well, the Rams signed him as an undrafted guy, and he was out there for most of camp. And Matt Gay's a pretty good kicker as well. So, it's not like he lost to a terrible kicker as a rookie. So people knew about him. But I give the Eagles credit, usually when you're in that situation, and the Cardinals were in the exact same situation. The Cardinals have a very good kicker, one of the best long-range kickers in NFL history, to be honest. And he got hurt. And they want the veteran routes and the proven route. And I say that laughingly, as Jody knows, because he watched Amendola kick for the Jets. And then it was a disaster in Kansas City this year when Butker got hurt. And they went with Amendola because he's got experience kicking in games, and the Eagles are like, we like this kid. Let's give this kid a chance. And they were right, and the Cardinals were wrong.
Now, has it been confirmed? Did Milton Williams? I got people texting me all week that Milton Williams blocked that ball, but I don't
think he did. We're going to get in the locker room today. Milton's certainly going to be asked, and I've already told him he should say yes either way. But
because he could have won special
I want the truth, Milton. Don't be lying. Don't listen to McMullen. Tell us the truth. Either you tipped it or you didn't.
He would have won special teams player of the week if he admits that.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, that's true. The coach said no. He didn't think he hit it watching the film, but the players were off. Michael Clay talked yesterday. He talked more about the push in the field goal block as a whole, the unit as a whole. So by the way he phrased it, it was kind of like, no, he didn't get it, but he was close.
Well, I don't know, John. if you saw, if you guys discussed this, but the Fox, were they on Fox? The Fox leading up to his kick, you know how they always record the kicker making kicks in pregame to show his distance. Every kick went off to the right, every single one.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, boom, it was almost the same trajectory of every kick that he had kicked in pregame.
Yeah. Well, I joked. Yeah, I think it landed in New Mexico because as soon as he hit that thing, it was like, oof. It was.
Here's what I would say to Milton Williams. Tell him, even though he didn't touch it, he gets credit for it because if the ball had gone straight, he definitely would have smacked it. But it was taking such a right-hand turn, the shankopotamus that it was, that's the only reason that Milton missed it.
Yeah. But either way, you're right. They probably would have had the special teams player of the week. So 5 out of 5. Can they go 17-0 with 17 players of the week, Mike Gill?
The way this season's going right now. Although I'll tell you what, it's almost been a different guy every week too. That's the thing, and that tells you about this team. Forget who's winning these awards; they're frivolous. But the fact that it's something different means somebody else is standing out, and that's another sign of a good balanced team. You know, who's it going to be next week? 1 week it's Hurts, 1 week it's 8. You know, they're just giving you different guys, and there's different candidates. And I feel like this team is still kind of feeling itself out, right? I mean, especially John Gannon on defense. I saw a lot of people being critical of him all week long. They gave up 17 points.
They give up 17 stinking points. What do people expect in the modern NFL? It's just
they want sacks. They want sacks and blitzes. They could give up 3 points, but if you didn't sack and blitz, he played too soft. I don't like the way he called his coverage. They gave up 17 points. I'm thrilled.
Didn't tackle well. You know, when they don't play defense, they didn't play defense as well as people think they should. They didn't tackle well in Detroit. They didn't play well. They didn't tackle well in Arizona. It wasn't as bad as Detroit, but that's when they don't play well, they don't tackle well. That's been
how much, John, you had Murray, the threat of Murray, which was by far the biggest threat of a running quarterback. How much did that kind of change the way they kind of sat a little soft because of having someone having to kind of watch him?
Well, you definitely don't want to play man coverage against a quarterback like that. That's why so few teams do it against the Eagles. The same thing. I mean, if you're playing man coverage and you have your back to Jalen Hurts, just think about that. He's going to run right up your back. Same thing with Kyler Murray. You almost have to play zone.
This is your classic. Let them catch the ball underneath and make tackles. If you don't tackle, it's going to look bad.
Yeah. And, you know, people blitz for different reasons when you have Arizona. And by the way, the Eagles blitzed, and I get that the Eagles blitzed a lot because they went to the sort of theory that teams do against other mobile quarterbacks. You blitz to keep them in the pocket, but you want a very disciplined approach. And I think that's the key to it. And I think Damo, our buddy Paul Domowich, what I'm trying to look it up. Yeah, Eagles blitzed on a season high 34.9% of the Cardinals pass plays. But they were blitzing for a different reason. I think people think, you know, there are run blitzes. When you're blitzing people like Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, you're doing it for a different reason than when you're blitzing Kirk Cousins. They had all those zero blitzes that turned into interceptions. You're doing it for a different reason. I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yep, I'm surprised to hear that number. What was it? 34% of the plays. I was surprised.
34.9. Yeah,
I'm seeing them. They did a lot of like zero up the middle blitzes, inside blitzes. People think of blitz, they think of stuff coming off the outside, just going after the quarterback. But you see the blitzes up the middle. They're filling those gaps, the 1 hole, 2, 3, trying to keep the stuff from up the middle happening and flushing stuff to the outside where they had some containment. I thought Vance Joseph, by the way, called a pretty good game. They blitz a lot. They blitz like 46% of the time. Yeah. And I thought he picked his spots really well. And I think Sirianni alluded to it. You know, they called a lot of screens to try to combat the blitz, but they disguised their blitz and picked their spots a lot better than I think the Eagles were thinking. And I think that first drive was epic. They were outstanding on the first drive, but I thought Arizona said, okay, we can't be so aggressive. They scaled back a little bit, and I thought the chess match was on after that. And I thought Vance Joseph did a pretty good job of picking his spots.
Mike, a story that's gotten some pretty good legs to it, media and fans, is what the heck were they doing with A.J. Brown? He doesn't start the game. They start in 13 personnel. He's standing there on the sidelines. Then they put him in, and they almost throw it to him exclusively for an entire set of down. And then he just kind of disappears into the ether. And I get it. He's your $100 million man. He's been dominant for the first 4 weeks of the season. But the opposition does get a say in how much they're going to allow your star player. They want to take him out of the game, they can take him out of the game. That's going to leave other people wide open. The Eagles did settle for a lot of wide receiver screens and bubble screens and the like. Do you make as big a deal as some people make out of how do you get A.J. Brown that little involved in any game that he's in an Eagle uniform?
Well, on Friday on my show, I do game balls, and my game ball was for Goddard. I thought Goddard would be the guy. I thought their defense, their linebackers are smallish. They're not that good in coverage. And, I thought Goddard was just due for the big game this week. You saw, by the way, Devonta Smith had 10 targets, kind of quietly almost. Like it seemed like they picked their spots. A.J. Brown had those 3 catches and then kind of went away. But I think the game plan was probably more set up for the guy that I thought was Goddard. I thought Goddard would be the guy. I didn't think it was going to be all those screens and everything. But going back to the first week, we talked about the same thing. How do we get anybody involved? I know Brown is the big guy because of the paycheck, but that Goddard is a beast, man. He's a monster. And if the Eagles want a game plan to get him the ball, I got no problem with that.
Yeah, the Eagles said behind the scenes that was going to be the plan. Dallas, it was going to be a big Dallas Goddard game, and it worked out that way. And the scripted stuff, the screens drove me nuts. They drove everybody nuts. But the scripted screens worked. The blitz screens, they got too redundant. And Jalen Hurts probably pulled that trigger a little bit too often. But, Shane Steichen spoke yesterday, and he got asked that question, Jody and Mike, why no A.J. Brown? Why so little A.J. Brown? And he said, that's just the week, and that's just the way. No reason. Well, there's a reason, but they don't want to let us in on the reason that, and maybe they will later off the record, but there's a reason you do things. So for whatever reason, they thought that Devonta Smith was probably better equipped to handle this boatload of blitz screens than A.J. Brown. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's week to week, and they have good players. That's part of the out-talenting teams. Maybe you can make a mistake game planning, but you're just going to out-talent teams because you have better players. And I think that's kind of what happened in Arizona.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think back because Brown had that one drive where he seemed to be a big part of it. But
it was the first drive.
It was the first drive of the game when they seemed like and then after that, I think Arizona made some more adjustments. I don't know what the adjustments were to Brown. I didn't get a chance to watch the all 22 to see if they did anything different and said, hey, you're not throwing him the ball. But again, I have no problem. That's the thing with, as you just said, are you sad because Devonta Smith got 10? This guy was a first-round pick who many people thought was the best receiver in that draft class. He just gets overshadowed, and some of it's monetary, right? I mean, Brown is more physical. Yes, he's probably a more physical, complete receiver than Smith, but Smith is not like some secondary other guy. They just have so many ways, and that goes back to the conversation at the beginning of this, which is they have so many different ways, and they had another way to get you on Sunday.
Even though it seems like Jalen Hurts has been the quarterback of the Eagles for a pretty good long period of time now, he really hasn't. 4 games at the end of 2020, full season last year, and now 5 straight wins this year. Do the math. It's not a ton just yet. He's played the Dallas Cowboys twice. He's 0 for 2. He hadn't been really good in either of those 2 games, and he got the pass last year because they didn't need the last game, so they sent the JV out there against the Cowboys. But he's gotten his tail kicked twice by the Cowboys. Every game is important to the Eagles this year, and still very important to Jalen Hurts in his evaluation and quest for a $40+ million per year contract, which could be coming his way. How much does this game mean this week? Because it's the Dallas Cowboys, the Jalen Hurts.
Oh, I think it means a lot, guys, because not only for Hurts, for the season. I mean, Dallas is showing their defense is legit. They're going to be in this mix, and you got to start thinking about home field, right? I mean, you got to start thinking about that. This would be one of the teams that will be in the mix, you would imagine, for that. So you got to get this, especially the fact that it's at home. You know, you got to go down there later on in the season, and that game could be for a lot. But if they beat you in this game and they say they're within a game apart, that game down there is a big, heavy favorite for them. So this is a big game. If you're thinking Super Bowl, right? And I think everybody at this point is thinking Super Bowl. You've got to have this game. You've got to have home field advantage. And it's kind of, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but the Phillies are playing. Everybody's all on that train. I remember when the Phillies were really good in 08, 9, 10. And there was a week where the Eagles played the Giants and the Cowboys in the same week, and the Phillies were in the playoffs. And the Giant Cowboy stuff got swept under the rug a little bit because of the Phillies. I don't know if that's happening right now, but is that a good thing that there's not so much attention on this Dallas week as there generally would be? And keep in mind, they have a bye after this. So you throw the kitchen sink at them at this game, because if you're thinking Super Bowl, you got to have the number one seed. You got to get that home field advantage, and this game is paramount to get there.
And, you know, the Eagles don't want to hear this, but coming up, you mentioned it's this game, it's the bye. Then you have a bad Steelers team, a bad Houston team, a bad Washington team, what has been a bad Indianapolis team. Boy, man, if they get this one, we could start talking about Bob Groats going 10-0, I think.
All right, but be careful, because they do have that they don't stink New York Giants squad 2 more times this year.
Yeah.
McMullen's he's ready to roll back as the Giants stink stand.
I got to roll that back. I rolled it back. I did say the
is
Giants
it that, or is it, again, what challengers are in the NFC at this point? Or
the challenges are the Eagles and the Giants and the Eagles. You can focus in on those two, because you can say the same thing. If you want to say, well, who have the Giants beaten? Well, you can say the same thing about the Eagles.
You can say the same thing about everybody.
Teams, and the NFC isn't all that great.
Yeah.
You can say the same thing about everybody. I said, literally, the only teams that any fan gives you credit for beating is Kansas City and Buffalo. If you beat one of them, it's, you beat somebody. But other than that, you could beat any team in this league and no one's impressed.
And the 2 teams that have beaten those 2 teams, are you impressed with the Colts?
No, and did you watch?
Colts beat Kansas City. Are you impressed with the Dolphins?
Nobody.
And Kansas City.
Dolphins beat Buffalo.
Realistically, Kansas City at home the other night really should have lost that game to the Raiders.
Yeah, they should have. Yeah, they should have. And that's the thing. I was pushing back against Seth on our post game show, and I'm like, this team's 5-0. There's one undefeated team in the NFL. There is something to finding a way to win these games. It is not the coaches talk about it all the time. Part of it's cliche, but it's not easy to win in the NFL. Now, I'm not a big fan of these stats, but the Eagles started 2-5 last season. And Jalen Hurts, went on that run, and all of a sudden they're 5-0. We're almost at a calendar year of a season where Jalen Hurts is 5-2, 10-2 as a starter over his last 12. That's pretty good. He's 24 years old. He's not turning the football over. I mentioned that earlier, Mike. I didn't see this coming. Is it fair to say that this might be turning into something special?
Well, in a league, guys, that is set up for parity and to get knocked off here and there, the Eagles are finding ways to not be a part of the pack that is finding ways to lose. They are finding ways to win those games. When the Packers, everybody likes them, they find a way to lose to the Giants. You mentioned Kansas City. They found a way to lose to a poor Colts team. Teams are finding ways to lose. The Eagles keep finding ways to win. And one of the reasons why they're finding a way to win, John, is because of the guy either under center or in shotgun. I guess you can't say under center.
Usually in shotgun, but yeah. Well, quarterback sneaks. Don't forget those, because he's the best quarterback
he's taking
sneaker.
it directly from Kelsey.
Yeah. But I think it's more than, Jalen Hurts is one of those guys that you're beginning to see that when he's your quarterback, he's just so competitive and has such an aura about him around that team that you won't have one of those teams that just goes through one of those miserable seasons. He feels like the kind of guy that just simply won't allow you. But I think this goes back to Ron Rivera the other day talks about what's the problem? Well, the quarterback. He's not blasting Wentz as much as the instability of the position that they have had at that organization. But here's the problem and the difference. Everybody, I'm sure people watching here, and maybe some people, many people, they all wanted Howie Roseman out. He doesn't know what he's doing. He needs to go. He's the one constant, and I'm not giving him all the credit, but my point is the Eagles organization and Dallas to some point, they have stability. Washington is a disaster because they have no stability. They have no plan. If something happens, they jump off the train and try to start it all up. You can't keep doing that. And I think you're seeing the Giants now. They're finally feeling like we have a stable situation here. The Eagles' stability is part of all of the success, and it's Hurts that they said, hey, let's go with this guy. Let's make him the guy. It's a lot of the organization, I think anyway, the stability that this organization has had has allowed them to have this season right now.
All right, MG, I'm not going to ask you to preempt yourself, but I do want some insight here. So if you feel the need to give me 3 or 4 names that would fall under your game ball category on Friday, who are the key guys for the Eagles this week, Sunday night against the Cowboys? They have to play well if the Eagles are going to extend and stay undefeated, go to 6-0.
Well, like back in the day, I heard Ron Rivera in an interview yesterday. He was on a podcast, and he said one of the names that they thought about for the Commanders was the Hogs, right? Can we give the ball to the Eagles offensive line? Is that a team ball right there? The whole offensive line gets that ball.
They do it all the time. When they run for 200, the offensive line, every single member gets a game.
That would be, Jody, that would be my off. I do offense and defense. I'll give one out on both sides who I think will be there. The offensive line, to me, has to be the key in this game. You've got to neutralize their front. That's where they're the best. That's where the Eagles are the best. When you go, mano a mano with the best units, your unit has to beat their best unit. For the Eagles to win, the offensive line has to be the victor. So you can, by proxy, I guess, say Miles Sanders, but I'm going to go offensive line because they never get the NFC anythings of the week. But they should be the game ball this week. And on the defensive side of the ball, we don't know who's going to play quarterback for them, right? We have no idea. But I think Pollard is the guy that could be the key or the tricky guy in this game. They've been running the ball. That's what I like about not having Dak, is that I think they've done a really good job of, and my thought is when they get Dak back, are they going to stick with this game plan of just kind of giving it to Elliott and Pollard? But I think Pollard is the kind of guy who gives the Eagles some issues. So TJ Edwards would be a guy for me on the game ball side because Pollard comes out of the backfield. You got Elliott coming up the middle. So the linebacking spot, TJ Edwards would be the guy, the key on the defensive side.
All right. At Mike Gill Show. Follow him on Twitter, 97.3 ESPN South Jersey. Drive time 2 to 6 every day. I'll be on with Mike later today. You mentioned that Dallas offense. A couple years ago, we were talking about how many weapons they had. Now we're talking about Tony Pollard. He's a good player, but that's not Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and on and on and on, Ezekiel Elliott. What they once were. Is this a game? And I can't believe I'm saying this because I never thought we'd be in this position with the Eagles. Is this a game where the Eagles should try to push it offensively and outscore this team? Because this is not an explosive team. In other words, I think the Eagles could out-explosive this team. And I'm shocked that I'm saying that. But I don't think they can keep up with Philadelphia in a Paul Westhead, run up and down the floor type of game.
Yeah, it's not going to be week 1, Detroit, 38-35, back and forth they go. No, I don't think Rush has that in him, right? 10 completions, about 100 yards last week. One thing he hasn't done is turn the ball over. They don't ask him to do much. But, you got to put it in position to make him start to do stuff. And do I think it's going to be a shootout type of game? No, I don't think that the Cowboys can keep up with them.
No, that's my point. So if the Eagles go, deep to A.J. Brown, 7-0, if they keep pressing, if they get up 14-0, this game's over, right?
Let's just say the problem is I don't know that Philadelphia scores more than 24 either. I think that Dallas defense is pretty darn good.
No, that's fair.
And
you got to block 11.
If we're talking about, and I know you guys are probably short, but if we're talking about what they have to do, running the football doesn't amount a lot of times to a lot of points if the clock's running. Although some of their biggest scoring outputs, Detroit in the snow, they scored 50. They ran the ball all over that team. They ran the ball 50 times 2 weeks ago and scored a bunch of points. So, but no, I think it's a low scoring game. That defense is legit, but it should be fun Sunday night. I hope the Phillies game isn't at 6 o'clock because I'll be watching the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning at the same time, and that'll be too confusing.
Right. And I was going to ask, where are you going to be Sunday night? The
right
Gill
behind me there, man. I got
over the ocean. You're going up to Lincoln Financial Field. Where are you going to be watching the game?
I got two TVs right there. I got Phillies and Eagles. I got the space heater right there, ready to go.
All right, he's out on the porch with the hoodie on. Mike Gill, always a pleasure. Thanks, bud. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys.